Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Ayyona Janae, and today we are going to be talking about sex, of course, because this is, once again, the Sex Podcast. But in particular, we are going to be talking about sex education and a sort of curriculum that I've come up with, in these times of the viral crisis or whatnot. It has really caused our systems to have to adjust in a particular way, and more specifically our educational system. And so now a lot of parents are considering homeschooling and things of that nature, which is great. I love it. Keep your children safe. But it's causing parents to have to consider certain curriculums and things of that nature. And so what I wanted to do today is, I guess, contribute to their construction of a curriculum, especially if they have really young children. But even if they have older children, it still helps as well, especially if those children have not had proper sex education. So I have put together a curriculum. Let me just say first that one of my dreams is to reform sex education in the U.S. There are a lot of areas in the U.S. that do teach a more comprehensive style of sex ed, but most of the U.S. has not caught on to that. Countries like Denmark and Sweden and France and the Netherlands, they're right there. They have it. They have their educational system for sex is comprehensive, and it doesn't just focus on the act of sex, but it goes a bit deeper. And they also have lower rates of teen pregnancy, and lower rates of STDs and STIs among teens and things of that nature. And it's just because those teens are educated, and because the teens are educated, they also have different dynamics between themselves and the adults. And so I would love for us to understand the importance of forming communication and opening the ways of communication with our children in order to influence a better society and a better culture. So I have formulated something, and this is just a breakdown. Well, it's not even the whole thing that I have in mind, because the whole thing is long. It goes into years, ages, grades, different education levels, what can be taught in high school and elementary school, middle school, and things like that. Because sex itself is a very vast topic, and it can be stretched out from elementary school to high school. And it doesn't have to be sugar-coated. We love to sugarcoat conversations about sex with our children, and I don't know why. Well, yes, I do. There's two different thoughts or theories on this that I have. So One is that we get so caught up in trying to save our children, to protect our children. Great, protect your children. Not from knowledge. That's not a thing. It's not a thing to protect your children from knowledge, from the things that they need to know to be productive human beings. It's important to know about sex in its entirety. It's important to know about consent. It's important to know about sexuality, sexual orientation, gender, all of that. It's important to know about these things to be understanding of self and of of a person's individuality, and also to be respectful of others' individualities, and to be all around decent human beings to other people. Because when there is a cognitive dissonance pertaining to sex, that's the issue with sexuality, the LGBTQ community, GSRM community. That is one of the biggest things about the cognitive dissonance that people who don't understand have. The biggest thing is that they don't understand, and so because they don't understand, they fear it, and because they fear it, they don't know how to express that fear. So, or if they do express that fear, it automatically is defensiveness. And unfortunately, that defensiveness, coupled with the hatred and the misunderstanding that is bred from the hatred, it causes fatalities, unfortunately, and it causes people to be hurtful to others. And it's important to teach children, part of teaching children the fullness of sex education, the comprehensiveness of sex education, is teaching boundaries, respect, honesty, truth, care, compassion for other people, being a human being, a decent human being. So yeah, I'm really passionate about this, if you can't tell. And mainly because my experience with sex education, I was a child who I just knew things. And I knew that I was in an environment where people may not tell me the full truth. So I have to seek that truth myself. And being that I came up in the age of technology, when education was becoming more and more available online, I knew how to Google very early, or Yahoo. Well, was it Yahoo? It was some search engine before it was Google and all these other things. And so whatever that search engine was, I used it. And I got my questions answered that way, or I read books, things of that nature. And also this is bad to say, I guess. Well, is it bad to say? Probably not. Because I was just a curious child, and I wasn't necessarily watching it for pleasure or anything, but I was watching porn very early. I was watching porn, I think the earliest I recall watching porn is at age 4. And it's just because I was curious. I saw it, and I was like, okay, these people are naked, or they're nude, or whatever. Okay. Why are they naked? Why are they nude? Why are they doing these things? I'm gonna watch, because I'm just curious. And that's how I just knew things, and was able to learn things. Because again, I just knew that I wasn't in an environment that I would get my questions answered in. Not answered in the way that I needed them to be answered. So, in this episode, I'm going to break down how to talk to your children. If you are a parent listening, or if you have nieces and nephews, and you know their parents or your siblings or whatever won't tell them exactly what needs to be said, or they don't know how, and you want to figure out a way to help them out. I am very happy to provide this information to you, or at least the way that I think it could be done. Feel free to tweak it however you see fit, because I mean, it just all depends on the person. But this is how I would teach my children, how early I would teach them, and everything else. So what I will say is, again, the crux of teaching sex education to your children in this way that is open, that is without restriction. And when I say without restriction, it is free of any religious boundary that you may have. If you want to get into the religious aspect of it with your child, or the spiritual aspect of it with your child, go ahead and do it. But do not have those rose-colored lenses of religion on while talking to them, because a lot of what we are taught in religious text, it's not rooted in truth. It's not when it comes to sex, it's not rooted in truth, because there's a lot of bigotry in there, and there's a lot of a lot of those words have led to bigotry in the realm of sex, and misunderstanding in the realm of sex. And a lot of negative energy in that realm. So be careful with that. And again, I just think it's just more important to speak freely with your child when teaching them about these things, when teaching them about themselves, and having the conversation be free of the restrictions of religion and these different systems. Just teach them what is truth. So we're going to take a really quick break. And we're going to jump right in. So, see you in a bit.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
So we are back. As I said before, we're going to be talking about sex education, how to present it to children, especially in a time where our educational system has kind of taken a shift, and we have the opportunity to take education, especially sex education, into our own hands, and present it differently than what has been presented in the past. So this is, again, for those who have friends who have children who need help trying to teach them about sex education. If you have children of your own and you're trying to figure out how to talk to your children about sex, or if you're homeschooling and you're trying to figure out a way to do this, I would love to assist you. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So jump right in. Where do you start? When do you start? You start very young. You start as early as 1 year old. Why that early? Because language has cultivated itself in culture and society, and children learn language very young. Children before the age of 1 know how to speak. And so when you start them at that age where their minds are, very plastic. And what I mean by plastic, or in a state of neuroplasticity, is they're able to pick up on things quicker. They absorb things a bit quicker. It's perfect to start at this time. So at about 1, start with simple words like you would mama, dada, or whatever. Start with terms related to their genitalia, their body parts. Start with two simple things: biology and consent. So yes, no, vagina, penis. If you want to go as far as ovaries, testicles, breasts, etc., do that at your own discretion. But start as early as between 1 and 3. Teach biology and consent. Teach them to say yes, no. Teach them this is your vagina, this is your penis. Because what that tends to do is, if you look at how young, it's going to get a bit dark when I say this, but if you look at how young sexual predators tend to approach children, they'll start very, very young. And it's because they're counting on them, one, not having boundaries and not being able to say no to adults, and also not knowing how, they'll count on children not knowing the names of their body parts. So don't, I highly discourage saying things like your pocketbook or your no, or even if you say no spot, let them know why it's a no spot. Let them know why they need to have the boundary of saying no to someone touching it. And let them know this is your vagina, this is your penis. If somebody wants to touch it, it's okay for you to say. If somebody asks you to touch it, it's okay for you to say no. And it's okay for you to say no to an adult, period. We have this thing where children have to, quote unquote, respect adults, and that respect means disrespecting themselves. That is an issue, because it facilitates the idea within the child's mind that what they feel does not matter if they are being disrespectful, and their boundaries don't matter if it is disrespectful to someone else. That's not okay. Teach children early on. If you don't want to hug someone, it's okay. If you don't want to touch someone, it's okay. If you don't want someone to hug you or touch you, it's okay. But again, back to knowing the language. Teach them vagina, penis. Because if you say this is your pocketbook and all they know it as is their pocketbook, and then someone approaches them and says, can I touch your vagina or can I touch your penis? They don't know what a vagina or a penis is. So in their mind, they're gonna touch something that's not that personal to them, not as personal as their vagina or their penis is, because they don't know what that is. They know their pocketbook, and their pocketbook is sacred to them and no one should touch it. And so they're not asking to touch my pocketbook, they're asking to touch my penis or my vagina. I don't know what that is, but I know it's not my pocketbook. And so it's probably okay for them to touch it because it's not my pocketbook. Teach your children the correct terms. Even if you say genitals, teach them the correct terms. And again, teach them to say no. Teach them that it's okay to have a boundary. You're human. You deserve a boundary. You deserve respect. And if you don't want somebody touching you, it's okay. Tell me why you don't. Especially if it's an adult, and like the adult says, let me hug your baby, and then the baby like pulls away or they don't want it. It's okay. That's not disrespectful at all. There's something. Children are very perceptive, more perceptive than we think. And so if there is an energy that feels off about a person, a child will know, and they will not want anything to do with it. If it does not, what children know is what feels good. Point blank, period. If it feels good, they will gravitate towards it. We need to teach our children to be more heart-centered anyway, to be more feeling-based anyway, because what feels good, we need to teach children to operate from a sense of intuition. Because if it feels good for them, that teaches them to trust themselves. And it also teaches them that what they feel within is always right. Because the minute that we take that away from them by saying, you need to hug this person, you need to be compliant and do this thing, we teach them it's not okay for me to feel how I feel. It's not okay for me to, what feels good to me or what doesn't feel good to me is all a lie. Because you automatically take that away from them by saying you need to do X, Y, and Z because you not doing that thing is wrong. So then, if a child doesn't feel good hugging a person or touching a person, ask them why. Ask them, why don't you want to hug them? Like, it's okay if you don't, but why not? Tell me why not. Because then you open up those lines of communication. You allow them to feel like they are in a safe space, a safe enough space to tell you, it just doesn't feel good. And be okay with it not feeling good, because ultimately the reason why it doesn't feel good to them, whatever that energy is they're feeling, it's going to unravel itself eventually. So just let that be sufficient enough and say, okay, that's fine. You don't want to hug them. You don't want them to hug you. You don't want them to touch you. You don't want them to kiss you on the cheek or anything like that. That's okay. Or if, for instance, not to wish this on anybody, but say that child has already been touched by this particular adult. Well, now, since the lines of communication are open, now that they have been able to say, like, no, I don't want to hug this person, you can ask them, why don't you want to hug this person? They may say, because you're asking, you're inquiring, you're not condemning them for it, they may feel comfortable enough to open up to you and say, because they touched me a particular way and I don't like that and it didn't make me feel good. So now you can handle it. You can nip that in the bud real quick and begin to nurture your child and help your child heal from that trauma that they may have experienced. And also you have cultivated a safe space for your child. So next, between 4, so that's 1 and 3. Between 4 and 5, you start getting into gender and sexuality, because that's when, like, boys start noticing girls and and all this other stuff. Maybe because what if you have a child that doesn't particularly start to like boys or whatever, like girls or whatever, and we got to get out of this idea of sexualizing children in that way anyway, and just be okay with children just being. If they approach you and say, you know, I like this particular person in a romantic way or whatever, then okay. But stop automatically putting it on children. Like if your daughter has a boy, like a friend who's a boy, you ask them, is that your boyfriend? Your daughter may like girls. And that's okay. So start teaching them young about gender and sexuality and how the two do not always coincide, how your gender does not influence your sexuality, how your sex, your genitals do not influence your gender. And also you don't have to talk about this as well. But what I will say is I say that for those people who don't particularly like labels. If you feel a type of way about labels, and because ultimately labels are not always for the person, it's for the understanding of the external, of those who are external, because you don't always have to know. We need to get out of the mindset of feeling like everybody's business is our business, because you don't always have to know what somebody's sexual orientation is. That's not your business. Why do you have to conceptualize somebody else's life? Live your life. Mind your business. So I get not wanting to teach your children about things from that light, about like sexuality and gender and all of those things from that perspective, because you don't want to have them feel labeled and you don't want to put them in a box. I get it. But still teach it. I say teach it from the perspective of it's okay. Like if you feel like you need a name for this thing, then these are the names. And so if you ever want to not feel like you're different or that something is wrong, these are the names of these things. But also know that it's okay if you like what you like, or who you like, or whatever the case may be. It's fine. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. You're perfectly fine. There is a society that will try to tell you differently, but you're perfectly fine. You're a girl who likes girls. Okay, that's fine. You're a boy who likes boys. Okay, that's fine. You have a vagina, and the world tells you that means you're a girl. But you like things that boys like, or you like to present in a way that boys present, or you feel like you are a boy. That's okay. We don't have to label you as anything. You are just you. You are beautifully you. You exist in your body. And that is okay. Live in your body. Also, between 4 and 5, maybe even younger than that, just depends, because you may catch children earlier. You may catch your child at 3 masturbating. Teach them about masturbation. Teach your child about masturbation, and teach your child that masturbation is okay. Teach your child that it is okay for them to take control of their own pleasure. Teach your child about privacy, and that it's okay for them to need private time to themselves to make themselves feel good. It's playtime for them. We, again, have to get out of the mindset of sexualizing our children. Children do things to better understand themselves and to teach themselves how to self-soothe. So if something feels good to them, they're going to do it because it just feels good. They're doing what feels right to their body, for themselves. So teach your child that it is okay if they want to masturbate. Teach them about the word masturbation. Teach them what it is, and say, you can do this at home, in the bathroom, or in your bedroom. And be okay with your child closing the door. I don't know about like other cultures, but I know as a black woman, growing up in a black household, in the black culture, there is this thing where you don't pay bills, so you don't close any doors. That violates boundaries. This is your child's home. Your child should be able to feel safe in that home. And also in the room, the space that you have designated for them to sleep in, to live in, to be in. They should feel comfortable enough, safe enough to close their door and have time to themselves, and lock the door too. Especially if they're masturbating. It's okay. Stop saying you don't get privacy in this house. Stop disregarding your children in that way. Because you then teach your children to disregard themselves. And to further disregard their own children later in the future if they so choose to have them. So, allow your children private time. And let them feel comfortable enough to say to you, make sure they feel comfortable enough to say to you, hey mom, hey dad, I want to have my private time now. Can I do that? And say yeah. You know what that means. They know what that means. And that's okay. It's a time for them to fully get to know themselves a bit more, understand who they are, what feels good to them, what helps them self-soothe, all of that. And it also teaches them boundaries. It teaches them, my parents respect me. My parents respect me enough to let me have my alone time. My parents respect me enough to let me have something that feels good to me. And they don't shame me for it. They don't make me feel bad for it. This is okay. I started masturbating at about 4. And I did not feel comfortable doing it. I felt like it was for me, again, I knew the space that I grew up in. I was very aware at 4 of the space that I was in. And I knew that I didn't feel shame for it because I talked to my friends about it and stuff. I was not ashamed, but like I knew I was not in a space in which my family or my mom would understand me doing that. Or at least that's what I felt. I can't really speak for them. But again, children read energy very well. And so reading the energy of the environment that I grew up in, I knew that that was not a thing. And so I had to keep it to myself. It was my own little secret. But I always only did it in my bedroom. As I got older, I started doing it in the bathroom too. But I only did it in my bedroom. And it wasn't to have an orgasm. It was just something that felt good to me. I had this rabbit. I had this very huge stuffed rabbit. And I would hump it. And it just felt good. It was warm. It was cuddly. And I knew if I rubbed against it, it would feel really good. And so I did it. And again, it was just something that I knew I just had to keep to myself. Also, be understanding of sex play. Even though, what I also will say is, children they're not at the age of consent to say yes or no. Which means any interaction with a child is unconsensual. Any sexual interaction with a child is unconsensual. However, children do tend to engage in sex play as early as 4 or 5. And what that can look like is, let's play doctor. What that can also look like is, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. I can't say whether to allow that or not to allow that, because that's kind of a more controversial thing. Just because it's like, you're telling us that children can do X, Y, and Z. No. What I will say is, it is a natural curiosity for children to engage in. That's in the literature and things of that nature. It is a natural curiosity for children to engage with other children about body parts, especially when they're learning about their own body parts and they feel like maybe they can't get their questions answered. So they're looking to their friends to get their questions answered by saying, well, I know I have this, so do you have the same thing? And as they're describing it, they're probably like, no, that don't sound like what I have. And then they're like, well, let's see. That's considered sex play. I got in trouble for sex play as a child. I was about 4, and I was in preschool. I remember clear as day. We were on the playground by this gate that we thought was secluded, and it was me, 2 other girls, and this little boy. I lifted up my skirt or my dress or whatever, and the 2 other little girls did, and the little boy pulled his pants down, and we were really just like, that looks different. We got in trouble. And thinking back, that could have been a very shaming experience. Well, I didn't get in trouble. Like, I like scurried away. But, it can be a very shameful experience, because it's like, I was just curious and I didn't know any other way to get the answer. So everybody said it was okay. So we just looked at each other's body parts. So try to be as gentle as possible in situations like that with your children, and be understanding that really they're just curious, and encourage them to ask questions if you know that that particular curiosity is piqued. Encourage them to ask questions. Create that safe space for them. Yeah. Yeah. So that's all I have for that part now. And that's just that's really just the basics. So that's like first starting out. So I've set everything up to like what, age 6, 5, 6. And that's, again, just basics. And also not just that, but one more thing, touching on where babies come from. If a child asks where babies come from, tell them. Say sex. Because the thing with children is children will only want the answer to what they ask. If they want to know more, they will ask further questions. If they feel that they are in a space to be able to ask further questions. So if you outright say, babies come from sex, they'll say, okay. Now if they want to know what sex is, then you have the opportunity to compound some knowledge. You could say, well, sex is this. And well, you remember when I told you about genitals and things like that? Well, sex involves genitals. And so and the genitals do this thing. Or you could just leave it at sex involves genitals. Now, if they ask further questions, well, what do the genitals do? Then you're just compounding a little bit more knowledge. You're adding more knowledge. And they understand a little bit more. But don't get so flustered at the question of where do babies come from, because you feel like you have to tell them everything. You may not. You may just have to say, babies come from sex, and they're done. That's enough for them right now. And then maybe later they'll ask, what's sex? You told me babies come from sex, but what is it? So yeah. The next thing we're going to talk about, and we're going to, after we take this break, is teaching your children about relationships, because relationships are also a comprehensive aspect of sex that tends to be looked over. So again, we're going to take a really quick break and we'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Alright, I hope you enjoyed that break. We are back, and as I discussed before, we are talking about sex education, and we've touched on teaching your children consent, and also biology, body parts, and the importance of boundaries in teaching your children masturbation, and things like that, and also how teaching your children about sex education, being completely open and honest with them, will open up lines of communication to be able to fully understand your children, and also for your the opportunity for your children to fully understand themselves, because what we want in this life, in this world, what we want and what we need to function are highly functioning humans. And in order to be highly functioning humans, we have to know who we are, things about ourselves, how to be kind to others, how to have boundaries with ourselves and with others, how to be honest, how to be welcoming, how to be warm, how to be open. And we learn these things by having these very honest conversations, even about sex, with our children, because we teach them these things through these conversations. It's so much more than just telling them about sex. So, on this part, we are going to delve into relationships, how to teach your children about relationships, which I don't really have a lot of details here. That is a very, what is the word that I'm looking for? That is a very respective thing. It depends. It's respective to, it depends on your respective values. What you think what values you think are important in a relationship. Important values are what you taught just by having these conversations, honesty, boundaries, things of that nature. And even in that, in having these conversations, I guess you teach your children what it looks like to have a healthy relationship. Your children should want to feel safe in relationships, because what I will say is we gravitate towards what is comfortable. And if unhealthy relationships are more comfortable for us, unfortunately, we gravitate toward them. And we don't even realize it. We just think, this just seems normal. This is fine. So if you are raised in an environment where you just feel shame all the time, you can't express yourself fully all the time, your thoughts and opinions are always being shut down, you gravitate toward that because it just feels normal. Unfortunately, even if you try to escape it, it's something that's become so innate. It's a program that has become so innate within you that until you recognize it and deprogram it, do the work to deprogram it, it's just what you're going to keep gravitating toward, or what's going to keep gravitating toward you. So if we have these open relationships with our children where we are allowing them the space to be individuals, and we are allowing them the space to ask questions and to be curious and to know that when you ask a question, you're going to receive honesty, you're going to receive truth, and you're not going to be met with adverse reaction. When you create these spaces for your children to grow, they gravitate towards spaces in which they can grow in as they continue to grow older. So I guess with that in mind, I mean, this is also teaching your child about, again, relationships, about what a healthy relationship looks like. And so with that, you can kind of segue into teaching your child, like, okay, well, this is what, when you should want to have sex with a partner that, you should, so we love to say, it has to be special, make sure the person is special, but nobody ever talks about what special is exactly, not always. So you just say special, and we just supposed to assume what that means. But if you say, make sure that you can feel open in this relationship. Make sure you feel not constricted or restricted, but safe, and like you can grow and feel like you are not being taken advantage of. And when you feel like your boundaries are being respected, and when you feel fully loved, that's the kind of person that you should want to have sex with. Someone who answers your questions, who doesn't leave you in the dark about things, who doesn't hide information from you, who doesn't shame you. These are the type of people that you want to be in relationship with romantically, and not just romantically, but platonically as well. These are the type of, when you make your friends, these are the type of people that you want in your life. These are the types of conversations you want to be able to have, the type of open and honest conversations that you want to be able to have. This is the kind of respect that you want in the relationship, not respect, quote unquote respect, that is at the disadvantage of you, but it's at the advantage of all parties involved. You want this kindness, you want this love, you want this peace, this calm, in order to be able to cultivate more of that peace and that calm and that respect and that love and that honesty, that warmth, that openness, that freedom in the relationship. That is a healthy relationship. And this teaches your children that this is what a healthy relationship looks like. Being able to do these things, being able to be this way, being able to just be. And in turn, you also teach your children anything that is not this, anybody who does not exemplify these characteristics are not who you want to be having sex with, are not who you want in your life, because these people are not going to take your well-being into account. These people are not going to respect your boundaries in the way that you need. These people, if you're sexually speaking, these people are not going to take your pleasure into account. And I say that particular part because when you shame children, for masturbating and things of that nature, or asking sexual questions, you are shaming them and teaching them to disregard their pleasure, to not take their pleasure into account. Particularly if you shame them for masturbating. Particularly if you shame them for watching porn. Unfortunately, it happened. Well, not even unfortunately. I say unfortunately because of the different studies about pornography and things like that. But what I will say is, it's gonna happen. It's inevitable. They're gonna see it. But what I will say is one of the advantages of porn is that it teaches a little something. It teaches you what you do and don't like. Because there are so many porn categories, and you can sift through and say, yeah, I don't like that. That's a bit much. And you can also sift through and say, I like that. And so your child will be able to fully understand themselves a little bit more, even through porn. And even have the conversation with them about porn and say, I'm glad that you are able to discover something new about yourself through this medium. However, understand these things about it as well. Teach them the studies of porn and what can, and don't try to scare them into not watching it anymore. Don't say, if you do this too much. One thing I used to hate is like, people used to say if you masturbate too much, you'll go blind. That doesn't even make sense. But don't scare them and say, if you do this too much, then this will happen. If you watch this too much, then it's going to affect you this way. Say there's a possibility that this can happen. And so think about how it makes you feel. Always go back to a heart-based model. What does porn make you feel? How does porn make you feel? Does it make you feel a bit drained after? Because there's like some spiritual stuff surrounding porn as well, which I can do an episode on. But ask questions. Have that open communication with your children. Don't shame them about it. Have that open space. And teach them that it is okay to take yourself and your pleasure and your growth and your development into account in this way. And it is important that the people around you, the people that care about you, the people that love you, do the same. Do the things that are assist you in understanding yourself more and help you figure out what's pleasurable for you and take your pleasure into account. Have people around you that love you enough to take care of you. not sexually. It doesn't just have to be sexually. Your pleasure can be met in other ways. People that you can just have fun with, talk to, feel free with. That is pleasurable. Those are pleasurable experiences. And have people around you who want to continue to give you pleasurable experiences. Not anything the opposite. You don't need anybody wanting to bring hell into your life and always cause problems and negativity and take away from your pleasure. Because I don't know about you, but pleasure fuels me. Pleasurable experiences fuel me. Having fun with my friends fuels me. Having sex fuels me. It recharges my energy. Being by myself is pleasurable sometimes, and it fuels me. Watching something that's funny fuels me. Watching something that I enjoy, listening to music, eating great food is pleasurable. It fuels me. So teach them the importance of those pleasurable experiences and having people around to have those pleasurable experiences with who further contribute to those pleasurable experiences so that they can enjoy the full quality of life. And of course, the full quality of sex. If they're sexually involved with these people. If it is consensual. If it is a space of freedom. If it is a space of love. Thank you so much for tuning in once again to the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Ayyona Janae, and I wish you so much love, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.